Communalism in India has long been a deeply embedded, complex phenomenon, one that reaches into the heart of the country's social, cultural, and political life. At its core, communalism is the mobilization of people around religious identities, often with the aim of political gain. In the Indian context, this typically means emphasizing and sometimes exacerbating the divide between Hindu and Muslim communities. This dynamic is not new. It traces its roots back to colonial policies and the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. But in recent years, especially under Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, communal politics has taken on new, and in some ways more assertive, forms. Since 2014, Narendra Modi has been at the forefront of Indian politics, leading the BJP to 2 consecutive landslide victories. A lifelong member of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, or RSS, a Hindu nationalist organization, Modi's leadership is often seen through the lens of his ideological commitments. The RSS envisions India as fundamentally a Hindu nation, and its worldview is encapsulated in the term Hindutva, or Hinduness, which seeks to define Indian national identity in essentially Hindu terms. This has profound implications for India's secular fabric, its pluralistic traditions, and the status of its minority communities, especially Muslims and Christians. The BJP's approach under Modi has been characterized by a series of electoral and policy strategies that many observers interpret as communal in nature. One of the most significant tactics is electoral polarization. In practice, this means appealing to Hindu identity and, at times, using coded language, often referred to as dog whistle politics, that targets minorities without explicit reference. In states like Uttar Pradesh, which have large Muslim populations, communal rhetoric has been deployed to consolidate the Hindu vote, sometimes by invoking fears of demographic change or alleged preferential treatment for minorities. At the policy level, there are several examples that critics cite as evidence of a majoritarian agenda. The Citizenship Amendment Act, or CAA, passed in 2019, offers a fast-track route to Indian citizenship for refugees from neighboring countries, but only if they are not Muslim. This selective approach has been widely criticized as discriminatory and as undermining the secular principles enshrined in India's constitution. Another major move was the revocation of Article 370, which stripped the Muslim-majority region of Jammu and Kashmir of its special autonomous status. While the government presented this as a move toward integration and development, many saw it as an attempt to further marginalize Muslims and alter the region's demographic balance. Other legislative actions, such as the ban on the practice of triple talaq, a form of instant divorce in Islamic law, and the tightening of regulations around religious conversions, are presented as reforms. However, critics argue that these measures disproportionately target Muslim practices and communities, reinforcing the perception of a political agenda aimed at redefining Indian identity along Hindu lines. Beyond the realm of law and policy, there has been a marked rise in mob violence and vigilantism, often justified under the banner of cow protection. In India, cows hold a sacred place in Hinduism, and it is illegal to slaughter cows in many states. However, in recent years, there have been numerous reports of Muslims being lynched or attacked on the suspicion of transporting or consuming beef. Human rights organizations have documented a pattern of impunity, with perpetrators often going unpunished and, in some cases, even celebrated by local political leaders. This climate of fear and intimidation has further deepened communal divisions and raised concerns about the erosion of rule of law. Institutionally, there are allegations of saffronization, the infusion of Hindu nationalist ideas, symbols, and personnel into key state institutions. Education, for instance, has become a battleground, with changes to textbooks and curricula to emphasize Hindu achievements and downplay the contributions of other communities. The increased visibility of Hindu symbols in state functions and public spaces is another hallmark of this period, signaling a shift in the state's relationship to religion. The historical backdrop of these developments is essential to understanding their significance. Narendra Modi's political career has been shadowed by the events of the 2002 Gujarat riots, which occurred while he was chief minister of the state. The violence left over 1,000 people dead, the vast majority of them Muslims. Multiple investigations and court cases followed. And while India's Supreme Court eventually cleared Modi of wrongdoing, many human rights organizations continue to argue that he failed to prevent, or even tacitly condoned, the violence. The riots remain a deeply polarizing event in Indian public life, shaping both Modi's image and the perception of communalism in contemporary India. Supporters of Modi and the BJP offer a very different narrative. They argue that Modi is restoring pride in Hindu identity after decades of what they see as secular appeasement of minorities. For these supporters, policies like the CAA and the revocation of Article 370 are necessary steps toward correcting historical injustices and integrating all regions and communities into the national fold. They contend that Modi's critics, both domestic and international, are biased or misunderstand the realities of Indian society. Moreover, they emphasize Modi's focus on economic development, infrastructure, and anti-corruption measures, arguing that these priorities matter more to most Indians than communal issues. In their view, communal accusations are often used as political tools by rivals, or as a way for Western media to discredit India's progress. Critics, however, warn that the current political trajectory threatens to undermine the very foundations of the Indian Republic, secularism. The principle that the state should not privilege one religion over another has been a cornerstone of modern India since independence. Critics argue that the rise of communal politics is marginalizing not only Muslims, but also Christians and other minorities, pushing India toward the model of an ethno-religious majoritarian state. They point to increasing restrictions on freedom of expression, the targeting of dissenting journalists and intellectuals, and the use of sedition and anti-terror laws against political opponents as evidence of a shrinking democratic space. These concerns are not confined to India's borders. Western democracies and international human rights organizations have repeatedly raised alarms about religious freedom and the treatment of minorities in India. Reports from bodies like the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom have criticized the Modi government's record. Yet, paradoxically, Modi remains popular on the global stage, celebrated for his economic vision and his efforts to position India as a counterweight to China in global geopolitics. This duality, domestic controversy and international acclaim, underscores the complexity of Modi's tenure. The debate over communalism in Indian politics is ultimately about the kind of country India aspires to be. Is it a multi-religious, pluralistic democracy as envisioned by its founders, or is it evolving toward a more narrowly defined national identity rooted in the majority religion? For some, the assertion of Hindu identity is a long overdue corrective. For others, it is a dangerous erosion of the values that have held India together through decades of diversity and dissent. What is clear is that the politics of communalism under Modi and the BJP have reshaped the landscape of Indian democracy. The consequences are far-reaching, affecting not only the lives of millions of citizens, but also the very nature of the Indian state. Whether this period strengthens or weakens India in the long run will depend on how the country negotiates the balance between identity and inclusion, between majority rule and minority rights, and between the imperatives of development and the demands of justice. As India continues to evolve, these questions will remain at the center of its political life, shaping the destiny of the world's largest democracy.